Today's episode is sponsored by Sports Directory, your partner in PE. Is your PE budget feeling the squeeze? Struggling to find the right equipment to help your students thrive? Sports Directory has you covered. Whether you're restocking your PE cupboard, planning the perfect sports day, or looking to bring new activities into your curriculum, Sports Directory is there to support you. Plus, with their My School Rewards scheme, you'll get 10% back on every order, ready to spend on your next purchase. Visit sportsdirectory.com for all the equipment you need to boost your PE lessons and see how My School Rewards can help your budget go further. Yes, hello everyone and welcome back to the PE Insights podcast. I hope you're well. Conversations about physical education with me, your host Nathan Walker, brought to you by the fantastic team at PE Scholar. Today's episode is number 2 in our book review series. I'm joined by the fantastic Dr Vicky Randall, who helps me unpack this book. We were both sent the book by the author, Gary Zaharatos, to read it, to analyse it, to share our thoughts and to pose some questions to him on this episode. So I hope you enjoy it as much as we did. Gary actually puts myself and Vicky to the test as we construct a learning objective live in the episode. And there's lots in there for anyone involved in physical education. So I hope you enjoy it. And as always, sit back, relax, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hi, both. How you doing?
Hey, Nate. You all right?
Yeah, good, Vicky. How are you? Gary, how are you?
Thank you.
Hey, Nathan and Vicky. Thanks for having me.
Yes, very, very excited about this one. Number 2 in the book review series and meet the author. With me today, I've got the wonderful Dr. Vicky Randall from PE Scholar. And she joins me as we have a conversation with Gary Zaharatos. And Gary's come on today to talk about his recent, well, not so recent now, publication. And we're going to dive into his books and his PE insights. So looking forward to this one. Gary, how are you from the other side of the pond?
I'm doing pretty well. It's a little early over here, but I have my coffee and I'm ready to talk PE with you both.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we just mentioned that Vicky and I have got to the end of our week and Gary's got a day of work ahead of him, so we do apologise. Gary, we'll start then. If you would be so kind to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself and your educational journey so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of look at my career at this point as being divided into 2 halves. I've been in education for just over 20 years. The first 10 years of my career, I was a physical education teacher. I started out by teaching at a school that had kindergarten through 8th grade. So that was we have some schools that are like that, but not too many. Most of our schools are broken up K-5, middle school, and then high school. Yeah. So it's interesting to have, I'm a brand new teacher and you have 8th graders show up at 7:30 in the morning and then kindergartners come right after that. So it's a real challenge to navigate a K through 8 school. And then after those 2 years, I taught middle school. So I was able to just focus on 6th through 8th grade students. The last 10 years, I guess maybe 11 now, I've been in this really unique role in Colorado in Denver public schools where I'm an instructional coach mainly for physical education teachers because obviously that's the content that I taught. But I also work with some general education teachers and I work with building leaders as well. So I work with the PE teachers to coach them on what high quality physical education looks like in their gyms. And then I also bring in their building leaders so that all of us are on the same page and calibrated with what we're looking for when it comes to high quality physical education. So I'm really lucky in that my team operates on an opt-in only basis. So I get about 50 PE teachers who want to work with me and they ask me for additional support. And I can talk a little bit if you want about what that support looks like day to day. But I visit 3 or 4 schools a day. I get to work with really reflective teachers and building leaders. And I'm just really grateful that this role exists because I think it's pretty unique. I haven't really met anyone else who had like an exact role to the one that I have.
I guess the closest thing, Vicky, correct me if I'm wrong here, that we have to that would be like an educational consultant or, I don't know, someone going in and working with PE departments to...
It's sporadic though, isn't it, Nathan? Like it's a bit of a lottery if you're in a school where funding or specialist expertise has popped up to allow that.
Yeah.
And I can certainly see how much value we would have over here if we had that as a kind of in situ, in our system. kind of setup, really, that would be huge.
Yeah, it would be hugely beneficial. Yeah, tell us a little bit, Gary, about the building leaders, because that is definitely a term that our UK listeners definitely might not understand. What is their responsibility in a school setting?
Thank you. I appreciate you giving me a chance to for both of us, all three of us, to level set on terms. Because some things just sound or mean different. So when I say building leader, I mean sometimes we call them administrators. I just never really liked that term before. But I'm talking about your principals, your assistant principals. Okay. Sometimes we have instructional specialists that are based in one school, and that's great because they get to coach teachers as well. But those instructional specialists usually taught literacy, right? Or math or science or social studies. They didn't teach physical education or art or music. And that's where myself and my teammates come in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. It's really good to get that clarified. You said you go into 2 or 3 schools a day. Are they different schools every single day, or are they a group of schools?
Yeah. So while I have, like I said, about 50 or so teachers on my caseload, I try to work with groups of them at a time. So I might have 10 or 12 teachers that I'm working with at any given time. And I'll do what we call a coaching cycle. And I would love to hear if you both have something similar in the schools that you work in. I'll just give you a quick rundown of it. So a coaching cycle looks like you meet with the teacher and you set a goal with them. So you might want to set a goal around their learning environment, how they communicate expectations for behavior, or it might be a goal around how they align their lessons to standards and communicate to students what they're learning. It could be a goal around assessment. How are they checking for their students' understanding throughout any given lesson?
Sure.
After you set that goal, then you decide what the learning is going to look like. So you have a month, 4 weeks, 5 weeks maybe, to think about what are we going to do over the course of the next month to make progress in that area. So one of the things that I do obviously is observe them. So I go in and I observe their lessons and take notes. Another thing that we do is lesson plan, of course. The third thing that I do, and I just did one a couple of days ago, my favorite thing to do because I think it's so beneficial for teachers, is I get to take a group of teachers to go see someone else in a different school teach. And we align the thing that they're working on with what they're hoping to observe in that lesson. So on Wednesday, it really is. I took 6 of our PE teachers to go observe 2 other PE teachers. And you know what it feels like to be somewhat siloed in your schools, right? Usually there's one PE teacher, unless you're in high school, maybe there's a couple, but you don't really get to see other people teach your content. So it's super beneficial to bring folks out and have them see other teachers. And then to wrap up on that coaching cycle, the last thing we do is we periodically meet for feedback. So we check up on the goals that we're working on, and we continue to develop that plan and make sure the teachers are receiving feedback and implementing that feedback.
Yeah, I think that part around taking teachers into another setting to observe other teachers is a really nice sort of structure, I think. I don't know if we've got that as such, Vicky, here in the UK.
I mean, I certainly have seen lots of some examples, not lots really, in like teacher education, initial teacher ed, pre-service preparation programs, Gary. And I think that's been I've seen how helpful that is for our pre-service teachers. So I can, to have that luxury, but it comes back down to that role you said, isn't it? Having that person leading, driving, connecting schools together that creates opportunity.
Yes, because my thought around that was instructional coaching is very popular in the UK now. It is happening in schools, but it happens within a school most of the time, or perhaps across a trust, which is maybe a group of schools that work in collaboration towards a shared value. So they have maybe coaches or instructional coaches in the school that lead those sorts of processes within their trust or within the school, but not an external person coming in and managing those things. So that's quite an interesting difference. Let's get to the book then. You are the author of the book, Becoming a Distinguished PE Teacher. Tell us a little bit about what led you to that then, and kind of the genesis of writing that text.
Absolutely. So like I said, I've been in this coaching role for a little bit over 10 years now. And there was a teacher that I was working with. I guess at this point, it would probably be about 7 or 8 years ago now. And she was really struggling with student behaviors, disruptive student behaviors. So the thing that I was coaching her on was how she could do class resets. And in the book, I mentioned several different levels of how you could reset a class based on what their current behavior looks like. And I was working with her on it for about a month or so. And I realized that, we weren't making the progress that we wanted to make for a number of reasons. But I wanted to write down what the feedback that I was giving her in order to share it with her so that she could, skim through it and read it and refresh her memory on some of the concepts that we were talking about. And that was the first thing that I wrote down. So I think that's chapter 2 in the book, where it highlights some of those resets. So I wrote that down. And then, a couple of weeks later, I'm talking to a different teacher about something. And I find myself saying, I have these conversations, these similar conversations over and over and over again. I should really write this down so that I could share it with the next teacher, the next time this thing comes up. It took me about 6 or 7 years to actually, write everything and get it organized and publish it. There were times where like for a year or so, I just wouldn't even look at the document. But then I would say about 2 years ago, I got pretty serious. I was like, if I ever want to get this complete resource out to people, you just have to set a schedule and like sit down, and every night at 7 o'clock, I'm going to write for an hour or until I get tired, or I'm going to organize, or I'm going to edit something. So that's how it came about.
Awesome. So it's been a bit of a labor of love.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely. But, along the way, I've learned so much, like, just things about how to publish, all different kinds of things. So I love sharing that information too with other people who are starting to publish their own work. So it's really been cool to kind of learn and do it all yourself, and get it out there and have people interact with it. That's the thing that I care about most. So many people have reached out, sent me messages, whether it's emails or on Twitter or Instagram, and they tell me how they're interacting with it and the impact that it's having on their students. And that really just like makes it all worth it.
I think I know Vicky will be able to relate more to that than I, as someone who has churned out a few texts in that time.
Oh, Gary, I'm hearing you. You feel like you've lost something for a bit. When it's gone, you're like, should I be doing something? What's happening now? But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that contribution and that commitment and time, because it was a really insightful book. And I think it's a real privilege to hear people's journeys and experience, but to share it. Your role allows you to share it, right? Between schools to schools. But I can hear a collective sigh across our listeners going, there's a go-to chapter. I can reset my class. I can hear it now. And I think the behavior chapter really struck a chord with me, because I've done a number of years in schools which were quite challenging, just in the sort of outskirts of London where I was teaching, but also like the teachers I've worked with as training teachers. This is the thing they come to. How do I manage behavior? I'm worried about the behavior of my pupils if I can't get my students on focused or engaged, or what happens in PE if like they come into harm and that's my fault because I can't get a handle on this. So could you share a little bit about what your take on behavior is, what it means, how you've unpicked it in the book a little bit, and possibly a few little tips for those resets if you've got a couple to share now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, thank you both for just all of your kind words about the book and my work. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, one of the things too that I really wanted to focus on in this writing was like none of these things that I wrote in the book are like my own ideas, right? I came up with very little. I was able to observe other people do these things. And I know that there's also like really great textbooks out there that university students use. But what I wanted to create was something that every single PE teacher could read and feel comfortable implementing in their gyms like the very next day to go experiment with. So a lot of the things that I write about in the book, I put examples using teacher language, like using script of a teacher. Like, this is what you might want to say. You probably won't read it word for word. If you were going to say it to your students, you put your own spin on it. But I think that it makes teachers more comfortable knowing that, like you mentioned earlier, Nathan, this isn't just some pie in the sky philosophy, right? This is on the ground. Like, you can say these things and do these things with your students. So to go back to your question about behavior, I guess one of the first things that I think of is preventative measures. So if you can create an environment that is safe and welcoming and fun for students, the teacher has already won half of the battle. If students want to be in your classroom or in your gym, you're going to prevent a lot of disruptive behaviors from happening. I find that in elementary school, the elementary school PE teacher for the younger grades is a rock star, right? Every student loves their elementary PE teacher. So you have to be able to harness that and be excited about what you're teaching. And then the next day, be even more excited about what you're teaching in order to harness that student excitement and get them in the gym and having a good time. The second thing, once you get students wanting to be there, is that you have to have clear expectations for what you want your students' behaviors to look like. And you have to communicate those expectations clearly. And then you need to hold students accountable to them. So the example that I like to use most often is just something simple like how you enter the gym or how students get equipment during any given transition in a PE lesson. Would it be helpful to maybe talk about what one of those sounds like?
Yeah. I mean, it's big in terms of, this is just me thinking out loud here, in terms of what we deliver to our trainee teachers, our pre-service teachers here in the UK, and Vicky alluded to this earlier, that is one of the first things we cover, is that the importance of routines is huge in setting those expectations and about the learning environment. So I'll be interested to hear what some of the key routines are from your perspective and how they might compare to the routines we see here in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do students getting equipment in class. So the first thing that I recommend in the book and that I detail is that when you have students set up and organized in your class, you do it in rows. So there are some teachers who have students sit in a circle. There are some teachers who have students sit like on a 3-point line of basketball court. And there's nothing wrong with those things. I just offer a different perspective. So if you can have students sitting in rows, maybe you number them or you have them by various colors. One tip that I've actually found that's really helpful, tell me if you have this in the UK. In their classrooms, students sit on a carpet in the front of the classroom, and the carpets have squares.
Yep.
And it's like the blue row, and then the purple row, and then the orange row. If you can make your rows in the gym match the rows in the classroom, now students see PE as just an extension of their class, right? So if they're on the purple row in their classroom, they're in the purple row in the gym, and it's simple. Nobody's going to question it. They just come in and they have a spot on the purple row. So going back to something like getting equipment, what we don't want to say is when I say go, everyone go grab a badminton racket. And then everyone runs to the corner of the gym and they're fighting over equipment and it's just a mess. What we want to say is what we want students to do with their bodies, who we want to go get that equipment, and then what they should do with the equipment after they get it. So you might say something to students like, when I say go, the blue row, which has, 5 students in it maybe, is going to walk to get a badminton racket. They're going to find a spot in general space in the gym, put the badminton racket on the floor, be at a voice level 0, and have their eyes on me. And of course, you could change it. Maybe you want them to get a racket and start volleying to themselves right away. So there's lots of different ways to do it. The key part, though, is that you have to be very specific about what those expectations are. Then you can layer on a couple of other pieces as well. So you have the gradual release. You're going to send one row at a time to go do it. If you have a group of challenging students, you could have other rows give feedback on the challenge by giving like a thumbs up or a thumbs to the side. So what you might say is, blue row, can you demonstrate what it looks like to get a badminton racket and do A, B, and C? Red row, can you give them a thumbs up if they do it properly? And if you don't see them do it properly, for example, if they don't have a voice level 0, or if they're playing with the racket, or you give them the thumbs to the side or the thumbs down and make them come back and do it again. So you can have students hold each other accountable for a transition like that. Sorry, I can go on and on. Thanks for giving me some slack there, but you tell me what you think.
No,
Yeah, I love that. Gary, I was going to say you hit kind of two really key non-negotiables in me, or 2 points that I've done when I've gone into school and done similar work to you. In our elementary primary schools, the younger children typically get changed in their classrooms or in an area before they go to the hall or the gym or outside. And I've always used the environment of the classroom at the start. Like, that's where your PE lesson starts. Like, sit on the carpet ready to go as soon as you're changed. Like, 60 seconds getting changed, 2 minutes getting changed, sit down, ready to go. And that very point you made about if you can extend that extension of the learning, you're already putting into the frame of mind for your students that, oh, okay, this is about learning, this is about focus, this is about expectations, rather than it's playtime. Or, there's some joy in that as well, isn't there? Go in and do some play, but equally, if that's the result you want in that environment, that's great. And you also made me think about this idea of overload and cognitive overload. Think how many instructions as a teacher we could give. And if you're sitting there and I'm like, I've processed 3 things you've said, I can't remember the other 20. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just going to do what I think. Like, you're going to see a change in that behavior away from what you want. So I guess it's making that educator think before they're saying it, what actually am I going to say, rather than...
Yeah. And so what I notice is that teachers do a great job of, when they're lesson planning, they do a great job of planning their activities. They do a great job of putting their standards in. They do a great job of figuring out how they're going to assess students. What I don't think that most teachers do is plan for what you just said, Vicky, which is, what is it going to sound like when I want students to enter the gym? Or what is it going to look and sound like when I want students to go get equipment? A lot of teachers don't plan for the behavior part, right? Because it's very important to script out that language and practice it so that you know what to communicate to students when it comes time to do those transitions.
Yeah, it made me reflect on a recent observation I had in a secondary school, actually. I know a lot of the conversation so far has been maybe applicable to primary schools and elementary schools, and I've been into my wife's classroom where they've got little frogs and stuff on the carpet and the floor. But a lot of the schools in the UK will often use seating plans in the classrooms and have that structure to where they're sitting in grouped when they are receiving direct instruction from their teacher. And I had a trainee this week who, at the start of the lesson, wanted to provide instruction to the group, and she set up an area on the pitch, which was just a box. And the students came and sat down in that area, some sprawled out on the floor, some playing with the rubber crumbs, some playing with their hair, tying their shoes, looking at the clouds, all that sort of stuff. And there was a lot of instruction, and going back to your point on cognitive load, Vicky, there was a lot of instruction at that point. But because there wasn't that structure of like, we just said to her, what would happen if you sat them in pairs in like a little order, and there was some structure to where they've been asked to sit and listen to you, or stand and listen to you, because then they would make the reference to the classroom as well. They might be aware that actually, when I've been in structured positions like this before, I'm about to receive some instruction that's important, rather than I'm on a 3G AstroTurf now and I'm about to do PE, so it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to throw a bit of rubber crumb at my friend, or I'm not going to be as focused as I want to be. So I think there's a lot of sense to make the link between the classroom and the practical space when possible. And I think that's a really good example of doing that. Yeah. What else is there, Gary? Because we did want to talk a little bit about, because the first part of your book, or the first chapter of your book, is about positive learning environments. All right. So you talked about it being safe and welcoming and equitable. Is there anything else that you think PE teachers really need to get right in terms of the learning environment?
Yeah, I think so. So you mentioned safe and welcoming, of course. I write a bit about that. You mentioned we want an equitable environment. So we want all students to have access to all of the things in the lesson. So there needs to be enough equipment for everybody. We want students to have access to their peers so that everybody has a partner. No student is being left out. A lot of those things kind of speak for themselves. The thing that I'd like to layer onto that is, in order to have a high quality PE program and to have this learning environment developed like you all are, like we're describing, is teachers need to get rid of some practices from PE that were acceptable a long time ago, and that really aren't acceptable anymore. So the term that I use in the book is contemporary practices versus outdated practices. So, for example, something as simple as having captains pick teams, right? That's just not something that we should really do anymore if we're trying to set up an environment where students are going to be excited to come to PE and they're going to feel safe and comfortable. We've all heard the story of the adult, the 30 or 40-year-old adult who got picked last in PE class all the time, and the impact that had on their desire to participate in physical activity for the rest of their lives. So there's lots of great ways that teachers can group students with intention. We should be doing that as opposed to having captains pick teams. Another one that I write about is an overemphasis on competition. Competition's not a bad thing, but cooperation brings its own benefits. So there are some activities that we could take from being ultra competitive and shift the rules a little bit and make them cooperative so that all students are working towards the same goal. And then the last thing I would say, I think I wrote about 10 of them, but I'll just give a couple of examples. The other one that just really drives me crazy, and I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are assessing students on arbitrary metrics, right? If we want to have an equitable environment where students want to participate, well, we gotta be taken seriously, right? We have to grade students on their progress towards objectives, not if they're wearing sneakers or gym shorts or a t-shirt, right? So we shouldn't be having arguments about, well, if a student wears sneakers, should I give them 5 points or should I give them 8 points? You should be giving them 0 points, right? We're not grading students on what they're wearing. We're grading students just like every other class on if they understand and can articulate their learning of the standard and of the content.
Yeah, I think Vicky and I were sat nodding a lot there to those things, and a lot of them ring true. I guess the only, I suppose, tension perhaps is with consistencies and the bit around PE kit and uniform and that sort of stuff and those high expectations, and how do you manage having high expectations and a consistent approach to behaviour whilst then being that sort of like holistic in your approach to assessment and saying this isn't going to impact your assessment. It's quite a tricky balancing act, isn't it?
It sure is. And just to be clear, I don't want people to think that I'm not saying that being prepared for class is not important. It absolutely is important. But there's other things that we can do as opposed to assess students on those things. So there's a lot of teachers that I work with who have loaner sneakers or tennis shoes that students can wear, so that if they wore boots to school today, they know that, oh, oops, I forgot to wear my gym sneakers today, but I can go in this section, and pick out a pair of shoes so that I can still participate today, and they're not going to lose any points based on that.
Yeah. You know what, Gary, you took me back a few years to a student I had when I was teaching with high school age group. They were year 8, so 12, 13 years old. And she came in and she bought her brother's boxers, her dad's trainers, and her mum's teeth. There was nothing of her own. But she'd clearly gone to this effort to make sure she had her PE kit that day. And I was like, you're getting house points for that. I mean, I can't let you do your PE lesson in your brother's boxers or whatever it was. And we had clean spare kit for that student to wear, which was what every other child was wearing. But oh my, I was that stuck with me just as you were saying that. I had the vision of these boxes coming. I was like, whoa, let's put them away and we'll get you some kit.
That's hilarious. Hey, it shows that student really wanted to be a part of your class, right? They were doing anything they could to participate in PE that day.
Absolutely. And I think there are some schools that are perhaps more fortunate than others in terms of how well resourced they are to deal with that. I mean, I go into some schools and they've got that lost property section and spare boots and spare kit and stuff to borrow. But then sometimes you go in schools and that's just not, unfortunately, that's not available. And that's a broader issue and a bigger issue that we can solve, the three of us, in this conversation. But yeah. Vic, I don't know if you wanted to go into the CLO bit next.
Yeah.
I know you're really excited to talk about this. So
I am. I found a kindred spirit, Gary, here when I read this part of the book. So you do dedicate a significant part to content and learning objectives. And I feel like as well, like I've been banging on a drum for many years about the importance of setting those clear kind of focuses on content and language being really central and crucial to kind of everything we do in PE. We don't come to physical education and disconnect our minds or our ability to talk or share or show our understanding. And this links perfectly to your point about assessment. Like language and what we communicate is a huge part of our assessment in physical education as well. So I found this a really interesting section, and I would be like massively encouraging people to go and have a read of this, because I know in the UK we don't have the same kind of, certainly in England, the same kind of benchmark standards as I know you're talking about, and Shape America have done loads around this in the US. So you have that kind of guiding set. So we sometimes write these from scratch as teachers based on a very, very minimal program of study. Like at the moment, you can fold the PE program of study for our national curriculum in the back of your pocket, and still people don't know what's on that, and including myself, word for word. Like it's there, but it's minimal. So in the absence of that, this I think is a really challenging thing to do. But so important. So can you share some of your thoughts on, well, first of all, what you kind of see CLOs are, what kind of content and language objectives are for the listeners, so they're really clear on that, having maybe not read the book maybe just yet, why they're important, and how on earth do you write them effectively? Because like this is really hard in the absence of that guidance. Like, how do we do that? So three stingers there.
I can handle it. Keep them coming. So yeah, they can be a little bit challenging to write, and I think that we'll have the opportunity to run through the process. You can put me on the spot maybe, and we'll come up with one together, the three of us. It's always easier when you have some thought partners, of course. The reason that they're important, you touched on a couple of examples. One is because they align back to assessment. So we don't just want to see students making physical progress towards something. We absolutely do, right? If you're teaching them a physical skill, we want them to get better at that physical skill. Mm-hmm. We also want students, you mentioned it, Vicky, is to not turn their minds off when they come to physical education. In my view, in my philosophy on PE, and many people share this, of course, there needs to be a level of physical rigor, right? Physical difficulty, and also cognitive as well. We want students to wrestle with different concepts that we're teaching them based on these standards. And the best way, I think, to do that is to provide students with opportunities to use language to articulate what they're learning. By incorporating content and language objectives into PE lessons, you're setting PE apart from other recreational programs or recess. I don't know what it's like in the UK. I'm going to assume that it's somewhat similar, but PE teachers always need to advocate for their jobs here in the US, because you get a principal who says something like, oh, well, I need to cut X number of dollars from the budget next year. Is it going to be art or is it going to be PE? Right? Those are the things that they're going to get rid of. If you can prove to your principal that you have this high quality PE program where kids come in and do more than just breathe heavy and sweat, again, important things. We want them to do that, but they have to do more than that if you want to advertise how strong your PE program is. So that's why it's important. Any thoughts on that before I jump into maybe like what a CLO looks and sounds like?
And no, for me, you're just talking sense to me from my own perspective. I don't really know what else I can say other than it just helps to promote physical literacy, which is high on the agenda for me and my philosophy of improving relationships with movement for life. And if we make sure that we don't lose the physical from PE, and make sure that we still continue to develop the physical, but we also look at the wider domains of that and the wider human characteristics as well, then we're likely to improve and increase that. And I think, it's certainly singing off the same hymn sheet from my perspective anyway.
I mean, it's a sad place where, and we would completely agree, we're in a very similar situation at the moment, Gary, with trying to justify and advocate for subject, place and purpose and importance. So we're actually going through a curriculum review in England. Wales have been through one, and we've come to a point where we're saying, what is the place and status of PE? And then there's been another argument where, why can't we just be about the physical? Why do we have to justify our subjects with a means to make sure it has place and purpose? But I think it's not that for me. I think it's the mind and body cannot be disconnected. So how I think and feel when I move is completely integrated. Like, I don't just do without having a response, and I can't just do without having maybe some conscious thought or planned thought or emotional thought and response or connecting with others. Therefore, language is crucial. I mean, movement's language, but our oracy is also important. So I don't see it as it's a justification for giving our subject a stronger status, although it does, and it's sad we have to, but equally, it's integral, isn't it? It's integral to learning. Thought and body, mind and soul, they're as one.
That's a great point. I think what that says to me is we're speaking towards educating the whole child. We're showing that physical education is just another part of educating students in all of the things. When they come to PE, they should be able to use similar language to what they use in the classroom. And one of the things that I really talk about in the book and talk about with the PE teachers that I work with is how we do these things efficiently, right? So I don't want anyone to think that I want kids to come in the gym and just sit and talk to each other the entire time. That's not the route that we're going. But we want students to have these very short and efficient opportunities to articulate their language. You want me to go into Zaharatos? Yeah, CLO.
I think we'll look at developing one in a second, but I know Vicky's talked about this before, about how when those conversations happen, why are they not happening whilst they're moving? And you talk about going on a walk and how those conversations are really powerful when we actually move in with someone else as well, and building those sort of opportunities as well. So let's talk about the construction of one then. How can we build this? Let's think of an activity that we could perhaps build it into. Vix, have you got anything that you've been doing recently that we could use as an example?
I'm right now in the thick of writing some, listeners would have heard two of our colleagues at PE Scholar, and completely Catherine and Will talk about our Oak content writing a few episodes ago. And the beast that is juggling at the moment, where we're writing content for every school in England to access free from grade 1 through to the end of, year 1 through to the end of the compulsory high school. So that's been really, in my mind over the last few weeks. And I've been writing some year 3 striking and fielding games. Okay, so we're working through, what's the one I've been doing today? Oh, striking for accuracy. Okay, so I'm 7 years old, 8 years old, looking at how I might strike the ball in the lesson as a batter, hitter, to place the ball where it needs to go. And actually, I did an inset with a school this week, and they came up with a similar question as an example as well, about, because I suppose we're going into the summer months, and this might be the kind of units that schools are teaching in the primary elementary age. So could we work with that as an example, do you think?
Yeah, we absolutely could. Can I just ask a quick question for some clarity? So when you mentioned our Shape America national standards, each state in America also has their own standards, and they're very similarly written to the Shape national standards. In my experience, PE teachers can choose whichever one they want. So maybe on Monday, you write a lesson that's based on the Shape America standard, but then on Tuesday, you look at your state standard and you say, oh, you know what? I actually like this language a little bit better than what's in the national standard. So I'm going to use this one on Tuesday. What do you use for standards? Can you use our Shape standards if you want to? Like, do some teachers in the UK look at them as a resource?
Couldn't see why not.
Okay.
I would say many would not be aware of Shape standards. I have been, and I think what Shape do is amazing. But we don't. We just have that very slim. This is why this is such a challenge for our teachers, because we have that very streamlined, slim state. We have a statement per age phase, or not even year by year. It's just over a few years as a standard. So creating content and kind of CLOs from that is really, really hard without the subject knowledge. It's hard with subject knowledge, let alone if you don't have that.
Yeah, you're making me think of my first couple of years of teaching, where I would write my lesson plan, like just based on either a book that I was looking at, a resource, or whatever I learned in college. And then at the end of writing my lesson plan, I would just go up on the top and write the standard in. Oh, this is standard 1, this is standard 2. And what I wasn't doing then was using the standards as a resource. And what you're telling me is that a lot of teachers in the UK just don't have that resource to start off with, that language that helps them build out their content and language objective, or the questions that they're going to ask, or their assessment. So I just found that interesting. But I think we got to get into it. We've been delaying long enough.
I think we used to have a little bit more structure, because there was something called assessment, where there was levels, and there was kind of maybe some suggested language that we had to use, but then that was removed. And then the PE departments were given almost the freedom of the town to design their own assessment and content. And then what that does is it adds that real variety to and sometimes disparity between what PE looks like in different settings.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we don't have that to hang our hats on. So it'd be fascinating to kind of hear how you might create a CIO for that.
Before I ask Vicky some questions about this striking for accuracy lesson that we're going to write a CLO for, I'll just give a quick shout out to our Colorado State physical education standards. If there's any folks out there listening and they just want to Google Colorado State PE standards, we have some incredible standards in there. And I know we're going to hopefully have time to talk about this later. Our social skills standard, it's standard number 3. Just take a look at what we have here in the state of Colorado for social skills. It'll blow your mind, like how incredible and powerful some of these things that we have are.
I can hear the keypad tapping already, I think.
Nathan, is that you, or you
set it up for people to go and find?
Yeah. All right. So Vicky, you want to teach a lesson on striking for accuracy. Okay. So the first question that I'm going to ask you then, when we start to write this content language objective, is what we call an ideal student response. So if a parent or a classroom teacher or a principal asked one of your students at the end of this lesson, right? We're imagining the end of this lesson. Okay. What did you learn in PE today? What would you want one of your students to say? And I want you to try to think about it from the perspective of the age of that student. So try to formulate it as if you were, how old did you say this group would be?
7 years.
7 years old. Okay. All right. What do you got?
Okay. I would hope they would say they know how to strike a ball with an implement. They could direct the ball with some intention. So not in their words, now this is mine, isn't it? Coming out. So they'd be able
I can hit the ball where I want it to go.
Wherever I want it to go. Yeah, I can hit the ball where I want it to go. I can hit the ball into space.
What would you be teaching them in order to get them to do that? Like what are some of the physical traits?
We would be looking at body position, where to stand, how to hold the implement, where to identify space when we're, practicing hitting the ball, maybe using a T-stand to kind of isolate that skill a little bit more.
Perfect.
And so, yeah, I'd be wanting lots of practice and maybe some small gameplay where they have to respond to where the space is and how then to change the body position and how to hit and move the space around.
All right. I think that gives us just about everything we need. So when the first thing that we want to do is we want to write that response that you just said, and I took some notes down, and then we want to analyze that response in order to get what we call a language function. And I'll just rattle off a couple examples of language functions. You could have students describing something. Mm-hmm. You could have students comparing and contrasting. Mm-hmm. You could have students justifying why something is important. I've seen some really cool lessons where students predict things. So based on something that they're going to try, they're going to make a prediction on what's going to happen. what I think we would have students doing in this lesson, and there's never just one right answer, but the one that we'll just take and run with, is that you want students to describe how they can strike a ball with accuracy. When you want students to describe something, they are going to be saying what something looks like or what something feels like, and even maybe sometimes what something sounds like. So that's the language that we want to model for students and give them opportunities to use during class. So the way that I would write a CLO for this lesson that you just came up with would be something like, students will be able to physically demonstrate and verbally describe how to strike a ball with accuracy. And the words that they might use are looks like, sounds like, feels like, something to that effect. Now, that's what we put in our lesson plan. There's two other steps. One is how we communicate that in student-friendly language, because we don't want to talk like we're writing a lesson plan to a group of 7-year-olds, right? That doesn't make any sense. And then the second thing is, what questions are we going to ask students throughout the course of the lesson to actually give them opportunities to tell us what striking with accuracy looks like or sounds like or feels like? Which one do you want to do first? Do we have time to dig into those?
Yeah, we can dig into it. And it'd be interesting to hear what they might say, because for us, that's going to be a representation of their knowledge. For me, from a personal perspective, as someone who plays cricket to did play to a relatively decent level, the sound of the ball hitting the bat, there's nothing else like it. And I know when I've played a good shot straight away. More often than not, I didn't play many of them, but it was that sound was something that I kind of really reflected on here. But I think the description of what they might say is something we could look at.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to think about. I like to lesson plan for 3 questions. One is a beginning of the class question, and these are not like hard and fast rules. These are just ideas for teachers. At the first question that you ask might bring in some prior knowledge that the student has. So it might be a similar skill to striking with accuracy that they did in a different unit. It might be a different time where they had to describe a skill, but we're going to try to like lean on something that they already know. The question that you want to ask students in the middle can be about what they're currently learning. So you're going to check for their progress of what you're currently teaching them and what they're practicing. And then that last question is going to be something, hopefully, that takes what they learned and brings it to a different context outside of what they're learning in this class. It could be a different unit in physical education. If we're talking about a social skill standard, it could be something that they're going to do at recess or in their classroom or at the park with their friends and family on the weekend. So that's the general guidelines for how I like to plan out those 3 questions. So if we were going to ask students a question on describing how to strike with accuracy that might tie in some previous knowledge, what could we come up with? What ideas do we have for like a beginning of the class question?
About describing.
Yeah.
Can you describe where you have used or you need, say, drawing on that prior knowledge where they might have used that skill before in maybe other activities, or whether it's in their PE class or maybe PE context?
Talk to me about the last time you hit an object or you struck an object. When was that?
You guys are great at this. Perfect. Yeah. So I would use, and those are great questions. I would tweak them a little bit by using the exact language that you want students to use. So instead so say to them, can you describe to a partner what the last time that you struck an object, what did it sound like? Or what did it feel like? Or what did it look like? This way they know exactly what language you want them to use. I think you get some pretty cool responses from students, especially about the sound part, because now we're talking about accuracy, right?
Yeah.
So when you strike for accuracy, should that bat and ball be making the loudest noise possible? Not always.
Because I've used that as my misconception for the lesson, to say that power can sometimes be trying
to less accuracy.
Something too hard can actually lead to a misstrike or a misplaced strike. And you can help build them with those questions. Like, I guess what you're saying, Gary, to help them build them to see that misconception and where they may go wrong then when they're not thinking about those things or feeling those things or seeing those things.
Yeah. And if tomorrow you want to teach them about striking for power, you're going to get a different answer out of what it sounds like to strike for power. It's going to be a totally different answer. So we've got that first question. That's great. The second question, when students are engaged in the activity, maybe this one, the teacher's just asking one-on-one. So you mentioned, Vicky, that students would be in small groups and they're getting lots of reps and they're practicing striking for accuracy. Maybe you're just walking around, checking in on the groups, and you're asking them a question or giving them a prompt like, hey, before you hit this next object, can you describe what it looks like when you hit for accuracy? And now you're giving students just 20 seconds or 30 seconds to say, yeah, it looks like my body is positioned with my shoulder facing the target or something like that, right? I'm going back to the cues that you shared earlier. Or when I strike for accuracy, it looks like my feet are shoulder width apart, something to that effect.
I love that. And Nathan, we talked in the last episode I came on, we talked about cold calling, didn't we, as a questioning technique. And I love the fact that you could almost set them up. When I come round, I'm going to be asking you this. As you're doing it and practicing it, you know what I'm going to be asking when I come. Start to think about that. And then you're placing it consciously. So we were trying to avoid just the hands up response. So I expect everyone to have an answer to this, but the answer could be really open and different depending on you and what you're experiencing. That's great.
And also from a psychological perspective, you're encouraging visualization and mental imagery of the performance, the connection between both, and the thought processes, which is good. And I obviously love the point around cold calling, Vicky, of getting them to consciously think about the question whilst you're moving around, so that they've got that focus on the learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Nathan, that when students are thinking about and using language to articulate what they're learning, I think that it does have a positive impact on their performance of the skill itself. If you're making students describe for you what their feet look like when they're striking, or where their shoulder is facing, or what they should be doing with their eyes, right? They're going to remember that, and then they're going to implement it into their practice in the future. The last question, if we think about at the end of class, I'll put you put me on the spot, so I'm putting you both on the spot. So with the last question, is there a way that we can, and it doesn't always have to go this way, but can we think of a way where we could have students take what they learned about striking and accuracy and relate it to a different context? We're thinking of like our closure at the end of the lesson.
Okay. Could this be, are you thinking inside PE or completely out of curricula?
It could be either one.
So,
we love those cross-curricular connections, right? So yeah,
I'd love to make a connection here with, maybe this is a bit tough for year 3, but thinking about angles or speed, like, or force, or kind of like making that connection to something. Because what I love about PE is sometimes we can use some of the abstract learning, like from their science or their maths or whatever here we're talking about language and literacy, which you can also then say, right, you've had a go at that practically, maybe some connection there between where might we need to think then about where we place or object, thinking about maybe angles or forces or speeds if we want to connect into maybe like a maths problem. That might be a bit tricky for our year 7s, but hey, why not?
It's a great gene. You try it, yeah.
I guess I'd love them to think about what was the standout moment in your lesson today? When did you feel best? And what did that feel like? So when were you most successful today? And what did you do before you were successful? How did it feel when you did it? And tell me about that, because then it almost takes the conversation away from the physical output. So the ability to strike the object, but then the feeling that the emotion attached to that success. And the description of feeling is something that I think is also quite important for us to unpack.
That's great, because you could still use the language function of describe to ask students to describe a feeling that you had during a certain point in today's lesson and why you felt that way.
It could equally be frustration, right?
So,
You know,
Because you're going to miss some, aren't you?
thinking about my feet.
Feel frustrated. When else have you?
I'm just thinking about me at the driving range, and no matter how much I practice, it doesn't take away the frustration half the time. So, but being able to describe that is also a skill in itself for young people. So, that's one of
And
those.
like, Gary, this is genuinely be unscripted. We have just thought this up right now. There's been no planning with this discussion. But
yes.
what I'll bring full circle to this is, so in our lessons we're writing, we've used the physical literacy statement and the physical literacy principles for move, think, feel, connect. So in these lessons we're doing, there is actually two moves. There's a think, there's a feel, and there's a connection to these language objectives that we're writing into the lessons, which is lovely because you've emphasized that through those different domains as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to do that. And then just really quick, one more time to emphasize, you can have students describe, that could be one of them, but you might have another lesson where describing doesn't quite fit what you want students to do. So you just pick another language objective, a language function, like I said, comparing and contrasting. So let's imagine that you had students throw overhand yesterday, and tomorrow or today, you're going to have students throw underhand. You could have them describe what it looks like to throw underhand, or you could change the language function and say, actually, today, what I want students to do is compare and contrast what the similarities and differences are to throwing overhand versus underhand. And in that lesson, you're going to ask students, hey, yesterday we learned how to throw overhand. What's one thing that's similar to what we're learning today? And a student would say, oh, well, when I throw overhand and underhand, I step with the same foot, which is my opposite foot, right? But what's different is that when I throw overhand, I hold the ball by my ear. And when I throw underhand, I hold the ball by my hip or something like that. So you can use lots of different language functions to get students to articulate their learning in PE. The only thing we didn't talk about, and it's a whole nother topic, is accountable talk structures. Like you mentioned the walk and talk earlier, in order to implement these things in an efficient and effective way. But luckily, I wrote a whole bunch of pages on that and happy to share it with people if they want it.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think if we go back to our example on striking for accuracy, if the following lesson was striking with power, then there's obviously a quite clear contrast element to that.
Perfect.
I'm really conscious that we could probably talk for another hour about this. So I'd like to dive into the quickfire questions, if that's all right with you, Gary, and then perhaps we can close with talking about access to your book and future stuff. So, so these are questions that all our guests get, and I know I gave them to you beforehand, so you had a little bit of a chance to think about them. So, what are your non-negotiables for positive experiences for all in PE?
I was hoping that you didn't tell people that you gave them to me so that they thought I was really smart. That I didn't spend a half an hour the other night thinking about my answers.
I'm not going to edit it out. Sorry.
Not going to edit it. All right. Non-negotiables, like we talked about, it has to be safe, has to be a welcoming environment. It has to be rigorous, physically and cognitive, and it has to be fun. Those are the non-negotiables.
Love it. If you had to have a mantra, or if you have a mantra, what would that one be?
I didn't have a mantra until you asked me to have one. So it would be going back to physical rigor and cognitive rigor. It's got to be more than movement, meaningful learning. You have to learn in PE as well, then, along with moving.
Nice. It's a controversial question then. We've had a wide variety of answers to this question over the last couple of episodes. So if you could remove something from PE, what would you remove?
I mean, I don't know if I'm cheating with this one or not, but I don't think it's that controversial, at least for me. I'm getting rid of those outdated assessment practices. You can't grade students on their sneakers or their shorts or their level of effort. We gotta up that assessment to grading on standards-based learning.
Yeah, not too controversial, that one. I think we can all agree with that. Your whole book is full of lots of advice, but if there was one golden nugget of advice you can give someone about to embark on a career teaching physical education, what would that bit of advice be?
I've got two things that I share with all of the teachers that I work with, especially the new folks. One is that you have to have a good relationship with your principal. Principals make all the decisions. So have a good relationship with your principal. The second one is, one of the ways that you can do that is by what I like to call building up capital, like putting money in your bank account before you go spend all the money you don't have. So do things for your school and for your community and for your colleagues and for your bosses and your students in order to earn some of that capital, so that one day when you need something from them, you have money to spend, right? Don't be that brand new teacher who comes in the building and starts complaining about your schedule. Oh, I have kindergarten and then I have fifth grade. I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. It's your first year, my friend. Nobody knows you. You have to build relationships with people, right? So build some capital and then spend it wisely. Don't pick every fight in your building, right? Know what to dig in and know what to just let go.
Yeah, I like that. It's quite harsh advice, but it's still very good advice. If PE could be or should be one word for young people, what would that one word be for you?
Joyful. It's that simple. It's got to be joyful, because we want kids to be engaged in activity throughout their entire lives.
I love that. And finally then, close up for us if you can, Gary. You talked before about the codes. There might be an opportunity now to share the codes, and also what you're working on next.
Yeah. So I have some free Audible codes for the book that only work with UK listeners. So if you're listening and you're in the UK, please email me. My email address is gary@distinguishedpe.com, and I'll be more than happy to respond with a free code so that you could listen to the book on Audible. On that note, if anybody wants access to the book, I don't do this to get rich. I do this to get my ideas out there and to improve the experience for teachers and students. So if you want a copy of the book, I can email you a copy, an EPUB version that you could read on your Kindle or on your iPad. So again, email me, reach out, tell me a little bit about what you teach, and I'm more than happy to respond with an EPUB file for you. Things that I'm working on, we have a book study, obviously, based on the book. We're finishing up right now with the teachers that I work with in Denver Public Schools, and we're going to offer it to everybody who's interested. Might be a little difficult with timing in the UK, but I'm more than happy to try to make something work out. I'll provide you both with a link in case you want to share it with folks where they could sign up and just get additional info as we continue to work on the dates. I'm working on a couple new chapters for the book. One I just snuck into the book about a month ago. Now I'm blanking for a moment on what I just wrote about. Because I'm working on another one that I'm currently writing a chapter on. If you walk into a PE program where it's a challenging environment, there's 3 or 4 teachers who have been there for 20 years, and you're trying to implement the things that I talk about in this book, but you have some resistance, and it's a bit of a challenge to try to implement a lot of these ideas. So that would be the other one. And then, it was on social media and the influence it has on PE. That was the last chapter that I wrote. And then I'm always working on, just like you both, a podcast. It's called the Distinguished Physical Education Podcast. And we talk about all the stuff that the three of us just talked about today. So hopefully I can have both of you on as a guest someday. I would be honored.
Yeah. I love it. Gary, genuine pleasure to talk to you this afternoon for Vicky and I to finish our week, to unpack your insights and to talk through, like I said, the genesis and your thought processes in the book. And I actually really enjoyed going through that example of building that objective. That was a nice touch. So thank you. And really, really appreciate it. Vix, anything from you?
Just been great, Gary. Thank you so much for the book. Thank you for your time, and thanks for putting me on the spot a little bit today. But I don't think my week's now finished. Now I'm gonna have to dive back into those lessons again, I think, now before I wrap up today. Well,
it was an honor. So thank you both. I appreciate it.